in and of itself. Most media has a lot of overlap with other dominant and powerful businesses in North American society.
And on the topic of media, I understand that there have been a lot of inconsistencies in the Ayotzinapa case. Can you talk to us a little bit about those?
Well, the inconsistencies have been that the official, the official line has changed multiple times. So initially, the students were thought to have been burned in the very first mass grave that was found in the outskirts of Iguala. This grave contained 28 bodies that still had that had evidence of being recently burned, but not so recently that they could be linked to the then missing students. So, and many of the bodies were belonged to women, and just the ages didn't match up. But in that moment, the Mexican government was very quick to fuel speculation that those were indeed the bodies of the students, and that all that was left was to find the remaining 15. The vast majority of corporate media, Televisa, and also U.S. media, repeated the official line and emphasized the narco-trafficking aspect without having any real proof. So, for instance, there has been very little proof as to where and when narco-trafficking elements were actually involved in the disappearance, the disappearance of the students. In fact, many of the students allege that there is no proof. That the only proof that they have, and that the only eyewitness that they have, the only thing that they witnessed directly was the presence of federal police, state police, municipal police, and a military element. So the media, by uncritically repeating the official line, is actually allowing for those inconsistencies to remain uncriticized. So that one of them is, just to summarize, one of them is the fact that they keep changing which bodies may or may not belong to the student. And the other inconsistency is just the manner in which they were disposed and who actually committed the atrocity. Those inconsistencies or those manipulated details have been repeated uncritically by most major media outlets. Even those outlets that are left-oriented have a problem either of contact with the Mexican community or with Mexico generally. They're unfamiliar with the case, they're unfamiliar with the community, and so they rely on critics, pundits, who traditionally work within a Latino white framework, and these people have sidetracked attention towards the details of the case. I could detail a few of these instances, but the point is that most people are either unfamiliar with Mexico, or if they are familiar with Mexico, have some type of interest that does not allow them to report topic in a clear way.
If the normalistas were not turned over to the drug gangs, what happened to them?
There's speculation that the military actually disposed of their bodies, burned them in chambers in ovens that are in their possession. It's a tactic that was well known in the 70s when the military was openly engaged in a fight against guerrilla elements, the remnants of Lucio Cabañas and Genaro Vázquez's groups, which were forced extremely into armed resistance, but had initially made their presence through conventional social groups, social movements, peaceful ones, that were militant in their resistance, but peaceful in the manner in which they engaged the government. But at some point, they were pushed into armed resistance, and the remnants of that armed resistance was still being fought by the Mexican military all the way up to the 90s, or thought to have been fought. I mean, that was the excuse that they used. At any rate, the military is suspected of having burned their bodies in chambers that are in their possession. That's one speculation. That's one line of inquiry. Another is that they have been kidnapped and they are working somewhere in a remote mine. If you talk to people in Guerrero and check out the local contacts, many believe that that's a possibility. There have been other cases of people being kidnapped and left in isolated areas for extended amounts of time. Even so, the speculation isn't entirely helpful what needs to be done is to have some type of international assessment of how the investigation has been carried out, and an honest review by these same international bodies, starting with the Committee of Forced Disappearances downward, of what the Mexican government can and can't do with regards to the case. One thing that everyone seems to agree on is that no one can close the case given the many number of inconsistencies related to it. I think we reviewed a few. The fact that it is unlikely that their bodies were turned over to narco-trafficking elements. The fact that the military was involved in many aspects. The fact that even the military is suspected of carrying out the thrust of the attack and the disposal of the bodies. All of these facts or speculations or credible speculations are pointing to inconsistencies in the investigation. And if it was not narco-traffickers, then who? Well, it was likely the state. And that's been the rallying cry for many of the organized protests that have been conducted in New York and elsewhere.
And you mentioned Lucio Cabañas before. As I understand that he's one of the graduates from the Ayotzinapa school. Is that why maybe perhaps they were attacked?
Ayotzinapa has always been a iconic or leading example of popular social resistance. Lucio Cabañas is a highly regarded figure in Mexican politics, at least amongst conscious Mexican politics. And so he was never an advocate of left or right dogmatisms, but rather he was a person who organized at a popular level, much like how the Ayotzinapa students do. They often appropriate consumer good trucks and distribute them amongst the population, bread, soda, many items that are relatively expensive, milk, eggs, and they redistribute them amongst the population as they see fit. So that tendency was established by people like Cabañas, and that tendency is something that the Mexican government finds extremely threatening because they are actively engaged in implementing a privatization model that has no respect for public and social infrastructure, no respect for the socialist infrastructure that was established under in the post-revolutionary period.
And what does Ayotzinapa mean to the Mexicans living outside of Mexico and living here in the United States?
Well, there has always been a very effective propaganda campaign smearing the Ayotzinapa normal and repudiating every aspect of its operation. One is this idea that they do not have standardized tests and that this invalidates their training. But as many people in the United States know, standardized tests never really give you an accurate measure of one's aptitude to teach or of the success in the classroom. And these type of arguments have been extended into the Mexican context. So for a long time before the actual attack against the students made it very clear, many in the United States actually had an unfavorable view of the Ayotzinapa. Once the Mexican government made such a overzealous attempt to destroy the school, it became clear to people in the United States what the Ayotzinapa Normal stood for. It stood for popular social resistance. It stands for popular education for the poor, and it has egalitarian principles that have become immediately appealing to Mexicans in the United States and in Mexico. In fact, the town of Tixla used to have a little bit of tension with the students because of the type of activity that they carried out. But since over 15 of the missing students are actually found from Tixla, the town that is closest to the Ayotzinapa Normal, because of that fact, the town has begun having better relations with the students.
Ricardo, is there a possibility that all these protests that are going on around Mexico, is there a possibility of ousting Peña Nieto from power? I think we lost Ricardo. Well, thank you, Ricardo, for bringing this very important topic to our listeners in Harlem Beat. Back to you, Maya.
And thank you for listening to Harlem Beat. Tonight's feature reporters are Gladys Brea and Taylor Coleman. PSA reporters are Ariel Bynes and Shabazz Khan. Our board operator is Susan Cabrera, assisted by WHCR's production manager, Tina Dixon. Music director is Jessica Daya. Camera operator is Michelle Yu. The radio journalism class is taught by Professor Angela Hardin. I'm your host, Maya Valerio. Thank you. Good night, Harlem. Thank you to our other feature reporter, Janice Menes.
This is a journey into sound.
We are on the air. Keep this frequency clear.
Do not attempt to adjust your dial.
Don't touch that dial. Keep it locked on WHCR 90.3 FM.
You need to keep it locked.
The voice of Harlem.
Turn it up!